Jack Martin liked living a simple life. Growing up in Detroit, he spent most of his time fixing engines at his small mechanic shop. On weekends, he watched football with his friends, drank too much beer, and sometimes went on dates that didn't go well. For Jack, life was predictable and safe. He never thought about leaving Earth or even Michigan until one evening. As the sun set over Detroit, casting a warm glow over the city, Jack was working on a truck. Suddenly, the sky turned dark, not like nightfall, but something different. The daylight disappeared in seconds, replaced by a huge shadow over the city. Jack looked up and saw an enormous spaceship hovering above, so big it covered the horizon and made the city dark. The ship's surface shone with metallic blues and silvers, lit up by thousands of lights. The air crackled with energy, causing static shocks on the ground. People panicked, screamed, and ran for cover. Car alarms went off, and traffic stopped as people abandoned their cars in fear. But Jack just stood there, frozen, wiping grease off his hands. Then, with a loud hum, a bright beam of light came down from the ship, landing a few feet from Jack. His heart raced as he stepped back. The light formed a cylinder of energy, and out of it came 3 figures. They looked human but were not. They were tall, wearing sleek silver armor that shimmered in the light. Their heads were long with small glowing eyes that changed colors. One of them stepped forward with a strange device that hummed as it scanned Jack. He felt a tingling sensation, like his whole body was being examined. Before he could react, the lead alien raised its hand and spoke in perfect English, though with a strange tone. "Jack Martin of Earth, you have been selected." "Selected?" Jack's voice shook. "Selected for what? And how do you know my name?" The alien didn't answer right away. Instead, the 3 figures made rapid chirping sounds before the leader spoke again. "You have been chosen by the High Council of Zarin 5. The universe needs you. You must come with us." "Wait, what?" "I'm not going anywhere," Jack said, stepping back and looking around for help, but the streets were empty. It was just him and the aliens. Suddenly, the lead alien raised its arm, and a small device on its wrist. Jack's body was suddenly filled with energy, and the world spun around him. In a blink, everything disappeared. When Jack opened his eyes, he was no longer in Detroit. Instead, he was in a huge futuristic room with advanced technology that looked like it was from a sci-fi movie. The walls were smooth and metallic, glowing with streams of light and strange symbols on floating screens. Jack felt dizzy and tried to understand his new surroundings. He felt a sharp pressure on his chest, and his breathing was shallow as he realized he had been taken by aliens. Before he could fully understand what was happening, a door opened at the far end of the room. Another alien entered, different from the ones who had taken him. This alien wore fancy robes and had pale green skin with small blue lights on its head. It walked towards Jack with calm authority, its eyes glowing softly. The alien bowed and said, "Jack Martin, welcome to the Zonian Empire. I am Vistra, royal advisor to Princess Margit. You have been chosen to fulfill a sacred duty that will unite our worlds." Jack blinked in confusion and took a step back. "What are you talking about? I'm just a mechanic. Why me?" Vistara's glowing eyes looked at him as if analyzing him again. "You have been chosen because of your genetic compatibility and the need for an outsider. Our princess, Margit, must marry to become queen, but no one from our empire will accept her. Our laws allow for an external union, and you, Jack Martin, are compatible with her." Jack's mind spun. "Wait, you want me to marry an alien princess? Are you out of your mind?" The alien advisor didn't react. "This is no ordinary request, Earthling. Margit's reign is very important for the stability of our galaxy. Our empire has watched your world for centuries. You will not only bring peace to Zarin 5 but also receive rewards beyond your wildest dreams, riches, knowledge, and technology that could change your world." Jack stared at Vistra, his mind spinning. "I'm not interested in your rewards. I didn't agree to this." Before he could say more, the advisor's tone became urgent. "You must understand how serious this is. The princess has reached the age where she must ascend the throne. If she doesn't marry, the throne will fall into chaos, and war will spread across the galaxy. You are the key to stopping this." Despite the grand explanation, all Jack could think about was how crazy this situation was. But there was something else, a hint of desperation in the advisor's words. This wasn't just about marriage, it was about the fate of an entire civilization resting on his shoulders. "Can I at least see her first?" Jack asked, his voice shaky. The idea of marrying an alien princess was so surreal that he needed to understand what he was agreeing to. Vistra's eyes glowed brighter as he pressed a button on his wristband. A holographic image appeared in the air between them, and Jack's heart skipped a beat. Princess Margit was unlike anything Jack had ever seen. She was nearly 8 feet tall, with a body covered in iridescent scales that shimmered with different colors as she moved. Her face was long with multiple glowing red eyes. Her mouth was full of sharp, jagged teeth. Tentacle-like arms extended from her back, moving smoothly. She looked terrifyingly alien, like a nightmare Jack could barely understand. Jack stepped back, his hands shaking. "You want me to marry that?" he asked. Vistra nodded seriously. "She is the future of our empire. She may look different to you, but inside, she is a powerful ruler. This marriage must happen." Jack felt his knees go weak as the reality hit him. He wasn't just being asked to marry an alien. He was being asked to marry the ugliest princess in the universe, a creature whose appearance made his skin crawl. But as he looked at the hologram, something stirred in him, a strange curiosity. There was a depth to her eyes, a loneliness he couldn't quite understand. Could there be more to this princess than her scary appearance? He didn't have time to think it over. Vistra's voice broke his thoughts. "Your choice, Earthling, will decide the fate of our galaxy. Will you accept?" Jack swallowed hard. Every instinct told him to say no, but something deep inside whispered a different answer. The promise of adventure, the chance to change his life forever, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Princess Margit than met the eye. Against all rational thought, Jack found himself nodding. "All right, I'll do it." Vistra's eyes gleamed with satisfaction. Jack knew there was no turning back. He had just agreed to marry the ugliest princess in the universe, and his life would never be the same. This version shows more of Jack's confusion and feelings as he faces the strange situation. It builds suspense as he agrees to something he can't fully understand. The stakes of the galaxy and Jack's hesitation make the story deeper and more tense. The Grand Zonian Palace looked like a living, breathing creature. The walls were not made of stone or steel, but a strange material that seemed to move and pulse like the skin of a giant cosmic creature. Glowing veins of light ran through the palace's exterior, creating a mesmerizing, ever-changing pattern. The palace stretched into the clouds with spires that disappeared into the atmosphere, their tips crackling with unseen energy. As Jack stepped out of the sleek transport pod that had brought him to the ceremony, he felt a knot in his stomach. He had been thrown into this situation with no time to really understand what was happening. Alien soldiers lined the path to the main hall, their armor shimmering in the dim light of the Zonian sun. Their insect-like faces showed no emotion as they watched the Earthling groom walk towards what was perhaps the most infamous marriage in the galaxy. The massive palace doors slid open with a low, almost sentient groan, and Jack was led inside by 2 Zonian attendants. Their flowing robes were made from a fabric that glowed faintly in the dark. As Jack entered the grand hall, he was struck by its alien beauty and unsettling grandeur. The ceiling stretched impossibly high, filled with floating orbs that lit the space with a soft, ambient light. The walls were decorated with murals showing the ancient history of Zarin 5, with strange alien beings fighting, making peace, and building their empire. The hall was full of important people from all over the galaxy. Some floated in transparent bubbles, others slithered on long limbs, and a few hovered above the ground in robes of pure light. Jack could feel their eyes, or what they had for eyes, on him. The air was thick with anticipation, as if the whole universe had stopped to watch this moment. At the far end of the hall stood Princess Margit, surrounded by her royal advisors and guards. Jack's heart skipped a beat when he saw her in person for the second time. The hologram hadn't shown how terrifying she really looked. Margit was very tall, her iridescent scales glowing faintly in the dim light. Her multiple eyes, now a deep fiery orange, blinked in eerie synchronization, and her long tentacle-like arms moved slowly behind her as if they had a mind of their own. She wore a regal robe that shimmered with many colors, flowing around her like liquid light, but it didn't make her look any less intimidating. The sight of her sent a chill down Jack's spine. Despite his fear, Jack forced himself to walk step by step toward the altar at the center of the room. His mind raced as he tried to steady his breath. "You can do this," he told himself. "It's just a ceremony, just a ritual. Marry her, keep things diplomatic, and go back to Earth rich beyond imagination." But even as he thought this, he couldn't shake the feeling that it wouldn't be as simple as he hoped. When Jack reached the altar, he found himself standing next to Princess Margaret. Up close, she was even more intimidating. Her skin seemed to move and ripple with energy, and her glowing eyes looked at him with an intensity that made Jack's breath catch. She stared at him for a long moment, and for a second, he thought he saw a hint of vulnerability in her eyes, but it disappeared quickly. The royal priest, an old Zonian with long silver tendrils that flowed like water, floated forward to start the ceremony. His voice echoed through the hall, speaking in the ancient language of Zeren 5, a series of clicks and guttural sounds that Jack couldn't understand. The priest waved his hands, and the air around them shimmered as a huge holographic projection of the Zonian galaxy appeared above their heads, spinning slowly. The ceremony was unlike anything Jack had ever imagined. Instead of vows, the Zonian tradition required a mental bond called the binding. It was a telepathic ritual that temporarily merged the minds of the bride and groom, allowing them to share their thoughts, emotions, and memories. It was said to be an act of trust, a moment when the two would truly understand each other beyond physical appearance or social status. Jack's heart pounded as the priest gestured for him and Margaret to place their hands into a glowing orb that hovered between them. Margaret's hand, or what Jack could only describe as a hand, was cold and rough like stone covered in flying scales. As soon as his skin touched hers, the orb flared with light, and Jack felt a sudden rush of energy. His mind was flooded with images and fragments of Margaret's life, memories that weren't his. Jack could see and feel Margaret's memories as if they were his own. He saw her as a young princess learning diplomacy on a distant moon. He felt her isolation and deep loneliness as other children in the royal court shunned her because of her appearance, even though she was destined to lead them. He felt the weight of her responsibility and the immense pressure on her as the sole heir to the throne. Most surprisingly, he felt her fear, that no one would ever look past her terrifying exterior, that she would always be the ugliest princess in the universe, unworthy of love or companionship. Beneath her cold, monstrous appearance was a being who longed for connection and understanding. This revelation struck Jack deeply. At the same time, Margaret experienced Jack's memories. She saw his simple life on Earth, his frustrations and dreams, his fear of commitment, and his sudden thrust into an alien world. She felt her surprise, curiosity about Earth, and even amusement at the simplicity of his life. But there was something else. A flicker of admiration for the strength he showed in agreeing to marry her despite the fear she knew she inspired. The connection broke as quickly as it had formed, and Jack found himself gasping for breath. His mind felt like it had been turned inside out, but the experience left him changed. He no longer saw Margaret as just a terrifying alien. He saw the being beneath the princess, forced into a life she hadn't asked for, a creature more vulnerable than anyone in the room could understand. As the binding ended, the priest raised his hands high, proclaiming the union complete. The entire hall erupted in applause, a mix of alien voices, hisses, and clicks echoing off the walls. The dignitaries and nobles raised their various appendages in celebration. Jack found himself standing next to Margaret, bound to her by tradition and law. Margaret turned her head toward Jack, her glowing eyes locking onto his. Her voice, deep and resonant, filled his mind in a private telepathic message. "You saw me," she said, her tone filled with both surprise and uncertainty. "You truly saw me." Jack didn't know what to say. The binding had revealed more to him than he had ever expected, and for the first time since arriving on Zeren 5, he didn't feel as terrified. "I did," he replied quietly, unsure how to express the mix of emotions inside him. The reception that followed was a blur. Alien delicacies, some of which Jack couldn't identify, were served, and galactic dignitaries lined up to congratulate the newlyweds. Jack shook hands, claws, and tentacles, his mind still reeling from the ceremony and the connection he had felt with Margaret. As the night went on, the grand hall began to empty. Jack was exhausted, both mentally and physically, but the night wasn't over yet. According to Zonian tradition, the newlyweds were expected to spend their first night together, a private moment to solidify their bond. As Jack and Margaret were escorted to their chambers, the reality of what was about to happen hit him like a freight train. He was about to spend the night with an alien princess, A creature whose appearance terrified him but whose inner world had touched him in ways he couldn't explain. He didn't know what awaited him behind the closed doors of their private quarters. All he knew was that this marriage was no longer just a political arrangement. Something far deeper had begun to take root. The private royal chambers of the Zonian palace were unlike any bedroom Jack had ever seen. As he stepped inside, his unease grew. The walls, like much of the palace, seemed to be alive, pulsing with faint bioluminescent light. The room was vast, its ceiling arched high above, disappearing into a twilight glow. Strange floating orbs provided soft ambient light, casting long, ethereal shadows. Jack stood at the entrance, frozen. He had never felt so out of place in his life. The opulence of the alien architecture and the unsettling alien biology that shaped everything about this world were still too surreal. Here he was, an earthling mechanic, about to spend his first night with a creature from another world. Princess Margaret stood at the other end of the chamber, her towering, terrifying figure dimly lit by the ambient glow. Her multiple glowing eyes followed his every movement. She was as still as a statue, yet Jack could feel her presence like a storm waiting to break. The alien appendages that extended from her back moved lazily as if they had minds of their own, while her iridescent scales shimmered in the low light. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the ceremony and the emotional intensity of the binding still hung between them, unspoken but heavy in the air. Jack's heart pounded in his chest as he glanced around the room, searching for anything that might make this situation feel less alien, less overwhelming. "I know you are afraid of me," Margaret finally said, her voice echoing in the chamber, deep and resonant. Her glowing eyes fixed on him. Jack couldn't tell if the sadness in her voice was real or imagined. He swallowed hard, trying to find the courage to respond. "I am not afraid," he lied, his voice shaking. "It's just, all of this, it's overwhelming." Margaret's eyes flickered, and the tentacles behind her curled inward. She took a step toward him, her large frame casting a long shadow over Jack. "You don't have to pretend. I can feel your fear," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper in his mind. Jack looked up at her, his fear mixed with a faint sense of empathy. He remembered the images from the binding, her isolation, the rejection she faced, the burden of her role. He knew she wasn't a monster, not in the way everyone else saw her. She was something else. But that didn't change the fact that she still looked like something out of his worst nightmares. Margaret moved closer, and Jack's instincts told him to step back, but he didn't. He stood his ground as she loomed over him, her alien eyes glowing brighter. "I have lived my entire life shunned by those who cannot see beyond my appearance," she said, her voice filled with sadness that cut through Jack's fear. "They see only the surface, the scales, the eyes, the tentacles. But that is not who I am." Jack felt a pang of guilt. He had judged her the same way, hadn't he? Despite what the binding had shown him, his instincts still recoiled at her appearance. He was doing exactly what her people had done for so long. "I know," Jack said quietly. "I saw who you really are during the binding. I felt it." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the faint hum of the living walls. Then, without warning, Margaret turned and moved toward the far wall where a strange, glowing control panel was embedded. She placed one of her tentacle-like arms on it, and the room filled with a low hum. The lights dimmed further, and a soft energy pulse filled the air. Jack watched as Margaret's body began to glow faintly, her form shifting and rippling as if made of liquid light. Her alien appendages started to retract, folding into her back. Her scales, once hard and jagged, began to melt away, dissolving into mist. Her many glowing eyes dimmed and became smaller, more human-like. Jack's heart raced as he watched the transformation. Margaret's terrifying exterior was changing into something else entirely. What remained was still alien but beautiful in a strange, mesmerizing way. Her skin was now smooth with a shiny, opalescent glow. Her eyes, once glowing orbs, were now large and expressive, a deep emerald green filled with vulnerability. She was still tall and otherworldly, but her new form was graceful, almost ethereal. She had become something Jack could recognize, something that didn't terrify him. "This," Margaret said, her voice now soft and almost human, "is the true form of my people." Jack stared in awe, struggling to find words. I didn't know." Margaret gave him a sad smile. We hide this form from the galaxy. To our people, beauty is power, and power must be feared. The royal family has always worn the guise of terror to maintain control. But beneath it, we are no different from you, Jack. He took a careful step forward, feeling the tension in the air fade away, replaced by curiosity and understanding. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because," she said softly, her eyes locking onto his, "you are my husband now. I have nothing to hide from you. I wanted you to see who I really am." Jack's heart pounded for a different reason now. The fear of her appearance was gone, replaced by the weight of the truth she had shared. He realized that beneath all the terror and alien grandeur, Margaret was just as uncertain as he was. She had been forced into this marriage, just like him, and she had revealed her true self, trusting him to see beyond the surface. The vulnerability in her eyes mirrored his own. She had risked everything by showing him her true form. Jack let out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. He stepped closer to her, his fear completely gone. "Margaret," he said, his voice steady, "I'm sorry I didn't understand before, but now I see you." Her expression softened, and for the first time since they had met, Jack saw something in her that made his heart ache, a deep, raw sense of hope. "I never expected this marriage to be anything more than a duty," Margaret whispered, "but I hoped you might be different." Jack reached out, hesitating for only a moment before placing his hand gently on hers. Her skin was warm, smooth, and soft, nothing like the cold, hard exterior she had shown the galaxy. He gave her hand a gentle squeeze, his voice quiet but sincere. "Maybe we're both more than what we thought." Margaret's eyes shimmered with emotion, and for the first time since Jack had arrived on Zarin 5, he felt a connection that went beyond duty and fear. The ceremony was more than just the binding. It felt real and human, even if she wasn't. They stood in silence for a long moment, hand in hand, feeling the weight of their bond. Jack had come to this alien world expecting a nightmare, but he found something unexpected, something fragile and beautiful. "I think," Margaret said softly, "this might be the beginning of something we both need." Jack nodded, his fear completely gone. "Yeah, I think so too." As the alien night stretched on, Jack realized that his first night with the ugliest princess in the universe wasn't what he had feared. Instead, it became something he never could have anticipated, an awakening. Months passed since the wedding on Zarin 5, and Jack's life transformed in ways he never imagined. The ordinary mechanic from Detroit was now the consort of Princess Margaret, a title that carried more power, responsibility, and weight than he could have ever dreamed of. Jack wasn't just a husband. He was now part of a royal legacy that spanned millennia and an empire that stretched across galaxies. The union had been the talk of the galaxy. At first, alien tabloids and news channels from various planets portrayed it as an absurd political move. The Earthling and the monster princess became a punchline in alien media. Many dignitaries whispered about the strangeness of the marriage, dismissing Jack as an inconsequential human, an outsider. But they hadn't anticipated how much Jack's influence would ripple through the empire and how much he had come to care for the one being he once feared. As Jack and Margaret grew closer, their relationship blossomed into something far deeper than the galaxy could comprehend. Jack's initial fear gave way to respect, admiration, and something that resembled love. Margaret, in her true form, became someone he could confide in, someone who understood him in ways no one else ever had. Her intelligence, wisdom, and strength radiated far beyond her once feared appearance. Jack saw the complexity of her spirit, the burden she carried as a leader, and the tenderness she hid from the universe. More than that, Jack became a key part of her reign. As word spread of the marriage, Jack's presence, once ridiculed, began to take on a more strategic role in the eyes of the galaxy. The Zonian Empire, always one of power and fear, found something different in Jack, a sense of diplomacy, humanity, and ingenuity that had been missing for centuries. A new era for Zarin 5 began. The royal palace buzzed with activity as the High Council gathered for another important meeting. For the first time in history, Jack stood by Margaret's side as an equal. He had learned much in the past months about Zonian politics, their complex social hierarchies, and the subtle art of intergalactic diplomacy. It was a steep learning curve, but Jack adapted in ways that impressed even the most hardened members of the court. The council chamber, made of flowing bioluminescent materials that constantly shifted colors, was filled with the most powerful figures from across the Zonian Empire. Some were humanoid, while others were completely unrecognizable beings of pure light, gas, or shimmering energy. Forms that defied physics. They all hovered or floated in their respective places, watching Jack and Margit with keen interest. Jack's palms were sweaty as he stood before the council. Though his days of greasy engines in Detroit felt like a lifetime ago, the weight of his new role still made his stomach twist. He had been instrumental in helping Margit usher in a series of reforms, but this meeting was critical. One of the council members, a snake-like alien named Ventil, hissed as his many eyes locked onto Jack. "The Earthling consort, what do you know of the politics of our worlds? What makes you fit to stand beside our princess and decide the fate of our people?" Jack met Ventil's gaze, refusing to flinch. His old self might have cowered, but not anymore. "I may not know every detail of your traditions," Jack said calmly, "but I know how to build bridges. I've seen what happens when you lead by fear alone. It breaks people down. I'm not here to change everything, but I am here to help Princess Margit create a future where the galaxy sees us as more than just conquerors." The room went silent. Jack's words echoed in the chamber. He felt Margit's presence beside him, a silent pillar of strength, her eyes now soft and glowing with pride. For months, Margit had relied on Jack's insight, learning to value his earthborn perspectives. His unique position as an outsider, someone who could see their empire without the bias of a Zonian, had given him a voice in the court that no one else possessed. He had taught her that leading with both strength and compassion would cement her reign in ways that fear never could. Ventil slithered back into the shadows, his challenge silenced for now. Other council members began to murmur, discussing Jack's point. Margit stood, raising one of her regal, glowing arms. "My consort speaks the truth," she said, her voice reverberating through the room. "The Zonian Empire is at a turning point. We can either continue to rule by fear and intimidation, or we can evolve, becoming a beacon of strength that unites worlds rather than subjugates them." Her calm and commanding voice brought the murmurs to an end. Jack stood beside her, his hand brushing against hers, a small gesture of unity in a room where gestures mattered more than words. As the council meeting concluded, Margit led Jack out of the chamber and into the palace's quiet gardens. The gardens were filled with otherworldly plants, gigantic glowing flowers that floated in the air, and strange twisting vines that hummed with life. The soft glow of the distant stars reflected in the pools of water scattered throughout the garden, creating a serene atmosphere. They walked in silence for a while, and Jack couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. The first night they had spent together seemed like a distant memory now, a night filled with uncertainty and fear. But now, standing beside Margit, he felt something completely different, a sense of belonging. Margit broke the silence. "You handled yourself well in the council today." Jack smirked, glancing up at her. "I didn't throw up. That's a win." She laughed, a sound Jack had rarely heard from her, deep and melodic. It was a side of her that few, if any, had ever witnessed, and it made his chest swell with pride. He had broken through her layers just as she had broken through his fear. "Things are changing, aren't they?" Jack asked softly. "For both of us." Margit nodded, her glowing eyes turning toward the stars above. "Yes, the galaxy is watching us now, but we will not bend. We will show them that strength and compassion are not mutually exclusive." Jack squeezed her hand, their fingers intertwined. "You're going to be the greatest ruler this galaxy has ever seen, Margit." "I know it." "And you," she said, her voice filled with warmth, "will be by my side. Together, we will shape the future." Jack felt a surge of emotion. He had never expected to find himself here, standing in an alien garden, married to a princess he had once feared, now proud to call her his partner. They weren't just two people from different worlds. They were a team bound together by something that transcended the galaxy's expectations. A future forged in unity. Margit's reign became legendary. The galaxy, once ruled by fear, saw a new kind of leadership. Margit's wisdom, combined with Jack's compassion and ingenuity, forged alliances with distant planets, brought peace to long-standing conflicts, and transformed Zarin 5 into a beacon of progress. Dignitaries from across the universe sought their advice, and their love story, once mocked, became an inspiration to millions. Jack's humble beginnings as an Earthling mechanic gave him a unique perspective that grounded the royal court in ways no one had expected. Together, they built a future where their differences became their greatest strength. The ugliest princess in the universe and the Earthling consort became the galaxy's most powerful and respected rulers. As they stood hand in hand, overlooking the vastness of space from the balcony of their palace, Jack realized something that made his heart soar. This wasn't just a strange twist of fate, this was exactly where he was meant to be.